In today's video, we're going to study the line-by-line explanation of the story, The Homecoming, which is written by Rabindranath Tagore. This story teaches us an important lesson that adolescence is a critical age and abandonment and isolation can have dire consequences. Adolescence is an age where they crave for love and acceptance. Hence, it is important that we give them comfort, safety, and empathy. Now, let's look at the story in depth. Fatik Chakravarti was ringleader among the boys of the village. So, a ringleader is someone who leads others into crime or mischief. A new mischief got into his head. There was a heavy log lying on the mud flat of the river, waiting to be shaped into a mast for a boat. He decided that they should all work together to shift the log by main force from its place and roll it away. The owner of the log would be angry and surprised, and they would all enjoy the fun. So if you see here, Fatik Chakravarti was a very mischievous boy who liked to have fun at the cost of others' misery. Everyone seconded the proposal and it was carried unanimously. That means without any opposition, everyone decided that they are going to move that log of wood from there. But just as the fun was about to begin, Makhan, Fatik's younger brother, sauntered up. So sauntering is walking slowly without any hurry, and sat down on the log in front of them all without a word. The boys were puzzled for a moment. He was pushed rather timidly by one of the boys. So timidly means not courageously or not with confidence, like slowly by one of the boys, and told to get up, but he remained quite unconcerned. He appeared like a young philosopher meditating on the futility of games. So meaning of the word futility is pointless or useless. Fatik was furious. Makhan, he cried, if you don't get down this minute, I will thrash you. So the only opposition that was met was by the younger brother Makhan. Makhan only moved to a more comfortable position, so he did not move. Now, if Fatik was to keep his regal dignity before the public, it was clear he ought to carry out his threat. So now it became an issue of self-esteem because he was the ringleader. And therefore, in order to keep his dignity or his self-esteem, he had to carry out the threat, which is thrash him. But his courage failed him at the crisis. His fertile brain, however, rapidly seized upon a new maneuver which would discomfort his brother and afford his followers an added amusement. So he thought of something better. So rather than thrashing him, he thought, let's move the log, which will discomfort his brother and will add to the amusement of his friends. He gave the word of command to roll the log and Makhan over together. Makhan heard the order and made it a point of honor to stick on, so he also did not move. But he overlooked the fact, like those who attempt earthly fame in other matters, that there was peril in it. So he chose to ignore. In order to get fame, he chose to ignore that there was danger in it. The boys began to heave at the log with all their might, so it was heavy. Calling out, 1, 2, 3, go. At the word go, the log went. And with it went Makhan's philosophy, glory and all, because he also started rolling with the log. All the other boys shouted themselves hoarse with delight. The hoarse is the rough voice that usually we have when we have a sore throat. But Fatik was a little frightened. He knew what was coming. So he knew or he anticipated what would happen. And sure enough, Makhan rose from Mother Earth blind as fate. So this is a phrase, blind as fate. So here we say fate is blind because it determines a person's happiness or misery without regard to any ethical behavior. He was really angry and he was about to do something furious. He rushed at Fatik and scratched his face and beat him and kicked him and then went crying home. The first act of the drama was over. Fatik wiped his face and sat down on the edge of a sunken barge on the river bank and began to chew a piece of grass. A boat came up to the landing and a middle-aged man with grey hair and dark moustache stepped on shore. He saw the boy sitting there doing nothing and asked him where the Chakravartis live. Fatik went on chewing the grass and said, "Over there." But it was quite impossible to tell where he pointed. So Fatik gave a vague answer. He did not want to help the person who had come. The stranger asked him again. He swung his legs to and fro on the side of the barge and said, "Go and find out," and continued to chew the grass as before. So if you see here, Fatik was a very rebellious child. But now a servant came down from the house and told Fatik his mother wanted him. Fatik refused to move. So he did not want to go home because he knew what was waiting for him at home. His mother would be shouting at him. But the servant was the master on this occasion. He took Fatik up roughly and carried him, kicking and struggling in impotent rage. So impotent means there is lack of authority here. He couldn't do anything. He was at the mercy of the servant who carried him back home. When Fatik came into the house, his mother saw him. She called out angrily, "So you have been hitting Makhan again?" Fatik answered indignantly. So here indignantly means showing either anger or annoyance on something that is perceived as unfair. Fatik was annoyed because he had not hit Makhan and it was the other way around. So he was showing annoyance that something unfair has happened. "No, I haven't. Who told you that?" His mother shouted, "Don't tell lies, you have." So the mother fails to trust Fatik because he is a very mischievous boy who is always up to something. Fatik said suddenly, "I tell you I haven't. You ask Makhan." But Makhan thought it best to stick to his previous statement. He said, "Yes, mother, Fatik did hit me." So he stuck to what he had said and he lied, saying Fatik did hit him. Fatik's patience was already exhausted. He could not hear this injustice. He rushed at Makhan and hammered him with his blows. "Take that," he cried, and that for telling lies." So he lost his cool and started hitting Makhan. His mother took Makhan's side in a moment and pulled Fatik away, beating him with her hands. When Fatik pushed her aside, she shouted out, "What, you little villain? Would you hit your own mother?" So the mother took Makhan's side because she thought he was innocent and Fatik was up to no good. It was just at this critical juncture that the grey-haired stranger arrived, the same man who had asked for directions to Fatik. He asked what the matter was, and Fatik looked sheepish and ashamed. So sheepish means embarrassed. But when his mother stepped back and looked at the stranger, her anger was changed to surprise. For she recognized her brother and cried, "Why, Dada? Where have you come from?" As she said these words, she bowed to the ground and touched his feet. So, his mother's brother had come to visit. Her brother had gone away soon after she had married and he had started business in Bombay. His sister had lost her husband while he was in Bombay. So Bishamber had now come back to Calcutta and had at once made inquiries about his sister. He had then hastened to see her as soon as he found out where she was. So he had come immediately to meet his sister, as he hadn't met her after her husband had passed away. The next few days were full of rejoicing. The brother asked after the education of the two boys. He was told by his sister that Fatik was a perpetual nuisance. So, perpetual means something that is never ending. So, he was constantly up to no good. He was lazy, he was disobedient, and wild. So, that is what she told about Fatik. But Makhan was good as gold, as quiet as a lamp, and very fond of reading. So that is why maybe the mother immediately had taken Makhan's side when they had fought. Bishamber kindly offered to take Fatik off his sister's hands and educate him with his own children in Calcutta. So here the brother wanted to unburden the sister and take Fatik away because he was notorious and causing distress to his sister. The widowed mother readily agreed. When his uncle asked Fatik if he would like to go to Calcutta with him, his joy knew no bounds, and he said, "Yes, uncle," in a way that made it quite clear that he meant it. So he was also eager to go to Calcutta with his uncle. It was an immense relief to the mother to get rid of Fatik. So she heaved a sigh of relief that the boy was leaving. She had a prejudice against the boy, and no love was lost between the two brothers. She was in daily fear that he would either drown Makhan someday in the river, or break his head in a fight, or run him into some danger or the other. So the mother was in constant fear that Fatik would severely hurt Makhan, who was as meek as a lamb, according to her. At the same time, she was somewhat distressed to see Fatik's extreme eagerness to get away. But she was in distress. Why is he so enthusiastic to leave his own home? Fatik, as soon as all was settled, kept asking his uncle every minute when they were to start. So he was restless because he was eager to go to a new place. He was on pins and needles. Okay, so pins and needles is a phrase which means quite restless all day long with excitement and lay awake most of the night. He bequeathed to Makhan in perpetuity. So perpetuity means something that is lasting forever. So forever he gave his favorite possession, which was his fishing rod, his big kite, and his marbles. Indeed, at this time of departure, his generosity towards Makhan was unbounded. So there was no limit towards his generosity towards Makhan because he was happy that he was leaving this place and going to somewhere better. When they reached Calcutta, Fatik made the acquaintance of his aunt for the first time. So he had not met his aunt and he met her for the first time. Was she pleased? Let's see. She was by no means pleased with this unnecessary addition to the family. So she thought, why was he brought here? She found her own three boys quite enough to manage without taking on anyone else. And to bring a village lad of 14 into their midst was terribly upsetting. So she was not ready to welcome Fatik with open arms. Bishambar should really have thought twice before committing such an indiscretion. So indiscretion is taking a decision without good judgment. So she was by no means happy to this new addition. In this world of human affairs, there is no worse nuisance than a boy at the age of 14. So she thought there is no worse nuisance than an adolescent of age 14. Let's see why. He is neither ornamental nor useful. So ornamental is something that is kept for show or something that is beautiful, nor useful. It is impossible to shower affection on him, as he is always getting in the way. So he is always coming in the way. If he talks with a childish lisp, he is called a baby. And if he answers in a grown up way, he is called impertinent. So impertinent means disrespectful to elders. In fact, any talk at all from him is resented, is disliked. Then he is at the unattractive growing age. He grows out of his clothes with indecent haste. That is, very fast they grow out of their clothes because they are growing so fast. His voice grows hoarse and breaks and quavers. His face grows suddenly angular and unsightly. It is easy to excuse the shortcomings of early childhood, but it is hard to tolerate even unavoidable lapses in a boy of 14. The lad himself becomes painfully self-conscious. So not only is he considered like a burden who is not helpful, neither is considered a child nor a grown-up, and also grows at a very fast pace. When he talks with elder people, he is either unduly forward or else so unduly shy that he appears ashamed of his very existence. So, this period of growing up is a very awkward phase. Yet, it is at this very age when, in his heart of hearts, a young lad most craves for recognition and love, and he becomes the devoted slave of anyone who shows him consideration. But none dare openly love him, for that would be regarded as undue indulgence. So they think if they give him a lot of love and care, then he will take advantage of it, and therefore bad for the boy. So he craves for recognition and love, but the people believe that if they give him a lot of care and love, he is going to take advantage of it. So, what with scolding and chiding? So, chiding is being critical. He becomes very much like a stray dog that has lost his master. So, he becomes directionless without love. For a boy of 14, his own home is the only paradise because that is the only place where he gets love and comfort. To live in a strange house with strange people is little short of torture, while the height of bliss is to receive the kind looks of women and never to be slighted by them. So, it is a blessing to actually receive kind looks by a mother or by a family member rather than by insulted by strangers who are not his family members. It was anguish to Fatik to be the unwelcome guest in his aunt's house. So he wasn't happy. Despised by this elderly woman. She did not like him and slighted. He was insulted. So he was insulted by her throughout, on every occasion. If she ever asked him to do anything for her, he would be so overjoyed that he would overdo it. So, in order to please her, he would actually overdo it, and she would tell him not to be so stupid but to get on with his lesson. The cramped atmosphere of neglect in his aunt's house oppressed Fatik so much that he felt that he could hardly breathe. So he felt trapped and he felt a sense of suffocation in his aunt's house. He wanted to go out into the open country and fill his lungs and breathe freely, but there was no open country to go to. Surrounded on all sides by Calcutta houses and walls, he would dream night after night of his village home and long to be back there. So he was eager, or he was yearning to go back to his own village. He felt suffocated here. He remembered the glorious meadows where he used to fly his kite all day long. The broad river banks where he would wander about the livelong day singing and shouting for joy. The narrow brook where he could go and dive and swim at any time he liked. So he felt like a free bird in his village. He thought of his band of boy companions over whom he was despot. The despot is like a ruler who has absolute power. So we knew he was a ringleader there. But here he felt powerless and at the mercy of his relatives. And above all, the memory of that tyrant mother of his, who had such a prejudice against him, occupied him day and night. So even if his mother was a tyrant and even if she supported the younger brother, he still missed his mother. A kind of physical love like that of animals, a longing to be in the presence of one who is loved. So he had a yearning towards going home. An inexpressible wistfulness during absence, a silent cry of the innermost heart for the mother, like the lowing of a calf in the twilight. This love, which was almost an animal instinct, agitated the shy, nervous, lean, uncouth, and ugly boy. So, uncouth means someone who lacks mannerism. No one could understand it, but it preyed upon his mind continually. So here he was reminiscing about his life in the village. And he so badly wanted to go back home because he definitely did not enjoy the city life. Moreover, if you see here, he is called shy and nervous. So a boy who was in the beginning called wild and disobedient had become shy and nervous and lean because he wasn't enjoying his experiences here. There was no more backward boy in the whole school than Fatik. He gaped and remained silent when the teacher asked him a question, and like an overladen ass, patiently suffered all the blows that came down on his back. When other boys were out at play, he stood wistfully by the window and gazed at the roofs of the distant houses. So here he did not go out and play, he was no ringleader, he was nobody. And if by chance he espied children playing on the open terrace, so espied means caught sight of, so he saw children playing on the open terrace of any roof, his heart would ache with longing. So all that he sought was to go home because he wanted comfort, familiarity, and also the safety of his home. One day he summoned up all his courage and asked his uncle, "Uncle, when can I go home?" His uncle answered, "Wait till the holidays come." But the holidays would not come till November, and there was a long time still to wait. One day Fatik lost his lesson book. Even with the help of books, he had found it very difficult indeed to prepare for his lesson. So, in spite of having the book, he found it an arduous task to study. But now, without the book, it was totally impossible. Day after day, the teacher would cane him unmercifully. So he was beaten up without any mercy. His condition became so abjectly miserable that even his cousins were ashamed to own him. So it had abjectly means it had reached to that maximum degree that his cousins were ashamed of him. They began to jeer and insult him more than the other boys. His own family members started insulting him more. He went to his aunt at last and told her that he had lost his book. So he took up all the courage that he had and finally went and told his aunt that he had indeed lost the book. His aunt pursed her lips in contempt and said, "You great, clumsy, country lout, How can I afford with all my family to buy you new books 5 times a month? So his aunt always bad-mouthed him and shouted at him. That night on his way back from school, Kartik had a bad headache with a fit of shivering. He felt he was going to have an attack of malarial fever, so he was feeling down. His one great fear was that he would be a nuisance to his aunt. So not only was he feeling really sick, but he was also thinking about how his aunt would react. The next morning, Fatik was nowhere to be seen. All searches in the neighborhood proved futile. Futile means useless. The rain had been pouring in torrents all night. It was raining cats and dogs, and those who went out in search of the boy got drenched through to the skin. At last, Bishamba asked help from the police. At the end of the day, a police van stopped at the door before the house. It was still raining and the streets were all flooded. The two constables brought out Fatik in their arms and placed him before Bishambar. He was wet through from head to foot, muddy all over. His face and eyes flushed red with fever, and his limbs were trembling. Bishamba carried him in his arms and took him into the inner apartment. When his wife saw him, she exclaimed, "What a heap of trouble this boy has given us. Hadn't you better send him home?" So instead of showing care and concern towards the boy who was really sick, she was complaining. So she was showing no empathy towards the boy and his condition. Fatik heard her words and sobbed out loudly. "Uncle, I was just going home, but they dragged me back again." So he tried to walk back from Calcutta to his house because he was so desperate to go home. The fever rose very high, and all that night the boy was delirious. So, delirious means when the fever goes to the head, to the brain, and then you start hallucinating and you start have all forms of illusions. Dishamba brought in a doctor. Fatik opened his eyes, flushed with fever, and looked up to the ceiling and said vacantly, "Uncle, have the holidays come yet? May I go home?" So Bishambar was feeling really sad for the boy. Bishambar wiped the tears from his own eyes and took Fatik's lean and burning hands in his own and sat by him through the night. The boy began again to mutter. At last his voice became excited. "Mother," he cried, "don't beat me like that. Mother, I'm telling the truth." So again he's hallucinating that his mother has come here and she's beating him up. But he was excited that finally he could see his mother. The next day Fatik became conscious for a short time. He turned his eyes about the room as if expecting someone to come. He was waiting for his mother to come. At last, with an air of disappointment, his head sank back to the pillow. He turned his face to the wall with a deep sigh. Bishambar knew his thoughts that he wanted his mother, and bending down his head whispered, "Fatik, I have sent for your mother." The day went by, and the doctor said in a troubled voice that the boy's condition was very critical. So, because he had malarial fever, and on top of that, he was drenched because of the rain, he was very critical. Fatik began to cry out, "By the mark, 3 fathoms. By the mark, 4 fathoms. By the mark." So he had heard the sailor on the river steamer calling out the mark on the plumb line. Now he was himself plumbing an unfathomable sea. So Fatik was he was in a deep sea, unaware of his surroundings, as he was delirious. Later in the day, Fatik's mother burst into the room like a whirlwind and began to toss from side to side and moan and cry in a loud voice. Bishambar tried to calm her agitation, but she flung herself on the bed and cried, "Fatik, my darling, my darling." She was also feeling bad that her son was in such a dire condition. Kartik stopped his restless movements for a moment. His hands ceased beating up and down. He said, "Huh?" The mother cried again, "Kartik, my darling, my darling." Kartik very slowly turned his head and without seeing anybody said, "Mother, the holidays have come. So finally you are here." So this is a very tragic ending to the story, which tells us that the boy faced a lack of empathy and had a feeling of being burdened within his own family relationship. And instead of feeling loved and being accepted, he was in isolation and abandonment and ridiculed by his own family members and people around him. So this is the end of the line by line explanation. If you haven't solved the multiple choice questions, I would recommend you to go do that. Please subscribe so you get notification to the videos that have been uploaded and you can watch them and improve. All the very best. God bless you.